which seems like a perfect segue into talking about the economic construction of the permanent registrar, especially since one of the big issues is how do we actually price names when they're not under contention.
And it's actually right in that same vein, which is that potentially the reason that we don't have good price discovery for names is a shortcoming of the system, and that if we want good price discovery, we need a built-in mechanism for people to sell their names inside of the system. It doesn't have to be a marketplace, but a way for them to actually do the transfer with the money moving in that process. And if that was built in, then we actually get price discovery, because as deeds move around, we get to, rather than them getting sold.
Yeah, but that only happens if the system we build in is the system most for user.
Right. No, what I'm saying is that we don't have to build in the auction mechanism or anything like that. The idea is that we actually just build the transfer mechanism.
We have a transfer mechanism.
But the transfer mechanism doesn't have a monetary transfer.
No, it doesn't.
Because if I buy a name for the minimum value, right, but then somebody buys it from me for above it, that transaction has to happen externally, and then I just transfer it to them and the deed cost stays the same. But if we can build something in so that the deed cost changes as part of that transaction, and there's a reason,
my fear is the following, right? Suppose that we make a system where you transfer it by paying and you can set a price, and that's okay, right? I can see a lot of people using it because it's full. But now imagine that number is used for something, right? Maybe that number is what will set the amount of the cost of registry fees or renewal, right? The moment that you add that, that's the moment where other people you start changing the behavior of users, because suddenly, first of all, if they don't use the official one, if they use the extra official one, maybe they can artificially inflate it up or down, right? Because suddenly, I want to sell you a name for very expensive, but I tell you, look, let's do it off the official place, because if we do it, the whole price of everything will go up.
Why would you want the renewal price to change in transfer? So I mean, so the idea is that we might want some transparency about what prices are. What names is you basically have an escrow system that involves kind of the name being transferred and the deed being transferred, but the deed has to be replaced with the new person's money.
I would never buy an aftermarket domain and have to renew at the same price.
No, so to clarify, the underlying issue is that the price of ether is highly variable. And if you need to set some cost for renewal of a name, you need some economic information to inform what you set that price as. And of course, one option is you just have an oracle in the form of, Vlad says the price is 0.01 ether this year, but we're looking for more robust mechanisms that depend on actual market.
But the whole idea that we want price discovery is kind of premised inside this like bigger context of like kind of some goals that we might have for our mechanism design, right? Normally we think about price discovery in terms of market efficiency and people's ability to know what prices they're going to have before they execute, which reduces their costs and uncertainty, which makes the market more efficient, right? It means there's more liquidity. However, I don't think that we can just talk about it kind of by analogy to other markets, because this market for names is a very kind of particular type of market, and the things that we might want as an efficient outcome might be different. It's not necessarily just reducing fees, right? It's not just reducing spreads. It's not like quickly responding to new information. It maybe has to do with like serving users, right? Or if we take the kind of like even if we let these things be titles and transfer with no kind of resolution or whatever, we still actually can influence what registrations look like and how, like say how easy squatting is, for example, just with an economic mechanism. And so we can care about user interests and stuff like that just through the economics. And so our definition of efficiency or optimality isn't just about giving us prices. But even if it was, there's lots of ways to get price information that don't involve actually transactions. You can say, for example, so there's a few mechanisms that I like. One of them is basically rent. Just like charge people every block that they have the name, and then you can pretty much see when you value a block name less than the discounted future rent payments, because they will sorry. It's an ENS token. The ENS token
that's unpegged from either, but it's just like one right? So it would decouple it from the price of ether. It would have a price to ether. I don't mean like an IC. Yeah, let's come out of this and do an IC. That's not what I mean. But I see what you mean, because the price of ether varies. A token, I guess, would be subject to the same forces. That might spike, it might just name coin.
And so how much you actually charge for rent is totally an interesting question. You might charge one coin and then leave it up to some other things in terms of how much the coin costs. But you could charge just any amount. Basically, so I just wanted to kind of make sure that we're thinking about this in terms of our actual goals for the ENS, as opposed to in terms of kind of more analogous or abstract notions of efficiency or price discovery.
So we should probably start off by clarifying what the purpose of charging money for a name is.
Yeah,
That's a good one.
I would like maybe to explain one of my first proposals on how that can be done on an anti-patterns mechanism. Maybe it will clarify why I think it's important to have a market data. Okay, so I think one way it's hard to define what squatting is, right? Because sometimes you're just buying something and you're selling, and you're actually providing a service because you are finding a good seller, right? So one way I can think of as squatting is simply sitting and doing nothing, right? Let's try to define it as you buy something, you sit on it, you do absolutely nothing to it, and you just resell it after for a new market value, right? I think that if you just do that, that can be probably a good definition of, by definition, you didn't add any value to it. You just held on it and sold it to the market, right? So if we could accompany how the market varies, then it would be great, because we could, ideally what I would like to is that you buy for something, and if 1 year later that your name, you can sell your name for twice the amount you bought, not because you did something special to your name, but simply because all names in ENS are now valued twice what they valued before. What I would like to have is that if suddenly all the names have double in price and you haven't done anything to it, next year, if you want to hold your name, you need to double your deposit. The reason being is that we assume that all names have doubled in price, and we don't want you to take any profit out of it that you haven't added into it. So right now, if you want to sell it, you can. If you double your deposit, you lock more Ether on it, and sell, your profit was basically zero. But your profit will not be zero if, number one, you did something to your name that makes it special, that makes that it had value, it valued more than the average, the market value, right? If you did something to your name, maybe you actually made it more valuable, or maybe you worked to make it easier to sell, or you found a client, then maybe you can sell it for more. And that's the whole purpose of following an average market value of a random name, because using that you can try to figure out who is sitting on it, and who is sitting on it will prefer just to to release the name and take the money out of it instead of having to lock even more money on it.
So is squatting a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, because what you described,
We should do a blind
I'm listening to you. I see how like buying stocks in a company, buying shares of Google, you sit on it for a year and it goes up in price and you haven't done anything to add value to Google, you sell your Google stock and you make your money.
But it's not a stock, right? I want that name to be available and useful. We want names to be used, right? We don't want you to do nothing and just sell your name later. Unless if you want to be a professional name seller, then at least I hope that you have like a huge business that we are finding clients or something like that, and that and then in order to make money, you need to be better by the definition than half of the other name sellers, right?
Before you do the straw, just one quick thing. So I'll tell you why I'm not as concerned about name squatting, because I personally think that the golden age of name squatting is behind us. It was an aberration from the .com days, and it goes back to when you type something into the location bar and you type dogs into the location bar and the browser's just appended .com to it, and that made dogs.com valuable. And since then, for a number of different factors, that's less of the case these days. So long story short, the days of, and I warned the guys from Netherlands on this video, I'm sorry, but I just think the golden age is gone. And if we put a lot of effort into solving the squatting problem, it might be like fighting last year's war. Because I don't think it's going to be a huge issue. There could be, there could be people who come in and buy a lot of names and try it, but I just don't think it's going to be a huge factor like it was.
But then Google solved it, right? You're saying that Google solved the name squatting issue.
No.
Well, but a number of
things,
different factors. It was a temporary aberration that will never come back. That sort of put a monetary floor underneath just having these generic names, right? Because pay-per-click values were much higher than they are now. All the browsers were the same, that people didn't know the different, users again.
But there's no real question that like a majority of the ENS registrations are squatting.
Yeah.
Is there?
No.
So
It's a vast majority, right?
Okay,
I mean,
so
I
how do we prove that? How do we know that name A is being squatted and name B is
So
being
chain analysis should be enough.
So we can't for certainty, we can get some stats, and the stat I have is that approximately 12% of registered names have a resolver set, and heuristically, if you are buying a name just to sit on it and resell it, you have no reason to set a resolver record.
unless we're using it as a metric to decide if we're squatting or not.
The spotters didn't know we were going to use this metric, so.
And even if they did, they have no intrinsic reason to spend their gas to try and deceive us about whether names are being spotted or not.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, you own, like, there are, 80,000 domain names. You own.
It's economically irrational
Yes.
from somebody who's trying to build a business on.
Not if as a result you keep your domain names in keeping
We are not using that as a measure for anything. We
But
just measure
but even if we were, just let me finish my thought. There's say 80,000 domain names, you own 1,000 of them. You could spend, say, one ether, like $200 worth of gas to set resolvers on all of them. Now the squatting percentage appears to be, less than 10, like another 2% less than it was before. It's not rational for you to spend all that money to timely affect a figure that has no clear outcome other than us arguing about how many people are squatting.
Well, okay, you say that, but people squat on loads and loads of .com domain names, and they refresh them every year at $8 a year or whatever.
Yeah.
With the hope that they're gonna, and that's not locking away the same $8. They're not going to be $8 back.
That's a different mechanism. That's
It's
a base cost. They're not doing anything extra though.
But if that's rational to spend a certain amount of money a year.
But that's to keep the name. You don't have to do this. You don't have to set a resolver to keep the name.
I fear that we are repeating the same discussions yesterday. Should we focus on what Bilal's key talking things we didn't discuss yesterday?
Actually, I would love to pick up on something Alex was saying. Basically, I think that the idea of like having price signal and basically, I think the fundamental idea is like force the market for squatting to be competitive so that the average like somehow, or for the market for names to be competitive so that like unless you outperform the market, then you're going to be operating at a loss. And there's a bunch of ways that I can see that happening. I think having a price signal and using that to charge fees is probably less. I'm more concerned about that than something like, for example, this idea of, imagine that there was rent, and the rent like kept increasing until like 2% of names are deregistered every month, and then if less than 2% of names are deregistered every month, if more than 2% of names are deregistered every month, then it would drop rent. And so then basically you have a certain fixed amount of names being deregistered every month, just in order to avoid paying rent, and that would kind of force a real churn, right? And somehow then like any of the least valuable 2% of names in theory would be the ones that would be released, right? So if you're not making enough to make rent off your name, right, then it doesn't make sense for you to actually.
So just, I do get all this, but the thing that leaps out at me is, can you help me out, Mark? Are there any domain name registrars out there who have a variable cost to read new domains?
Yes. Sorry, I know I'm not.
Go on.
Well, no, that I can think of. Well, actually, no, I'm wrong. Sorry. There's some registries have variable costs, and some of the newer models of the registries, they started charging premium prices for their designated premium lists. So not at the registrar level, but at the registry level. So .website, .domains, .club, all of those. When Rush hit,
Why does it matter?
It comes back to something Nick was saying yesterday, which is kind of your principle of least surprise. If you pick up an .eth name now, and I know it's not defined yet, but if 2 years down the line it's like, okay, so we're going to charge you a random amount of money every year for the next year to hold on to your name.
Oh no, wait. The
Okay.
principle of least surprise is more for the user than I interpret it as more for the user. It's really you type a name and you find what you expect. It's not about domain holders.
Yeah, but
Right.
if the domain.
I don't care about surprise.
Everyone's in the same case, though, right?
Yeah.
If you can guarantee no mistakes, fine. But if we're saying there are people who might be, and even if there are people who are using their names, but it can still
I think
get
we're
caught
getting into market manipulation. It's like you got people are going to do what they're going to do, and then the market has to sort it out. You can't say, well, this guy registered cats.eth, but he put dogs on the website, so that's wrong because the guy the user expects to see cats and he got dogs. Like we can't control that level of like intent in the mind of the user and the domain holder. We have to just kind of let it sort itself out.
So, yeah, my question is what parts of what we're talking about right now do we think belong in the ENS, and what parts do we think are the responsibility of, wallets or third parties or resellers or whatever? Because one thing that, when I buy a domain, like on like a .com, I'm not like I buy it through like GoDaddy or one of the oh my God, Jesus Christ. Okay, but sorry, I buy it through ECDNS. I mean, it doesn't matter, but I'm not like I'm buying this from a third party, right? And they are then doing all this work for me, and then I pay that $8 or $12, or if it's a premium domain, it can be like $1,500 now, right? And then that's like their service. I'm paying for that service to them, right? So the price of the domain that I'm paying is not at the registry level. It's not at the DNS level, right? So as when we're talking about sitting here talking about the ENS, we're talking about costs, we're talking about economics. What part of this are we talking about putting in the ENS, and what part of this are we just leave to the third parties?
It's the age-old battle of the registrars versus the registrars.
No, I don't think it is. I think it's very simple. I think on ENS, we need to put incentives to make sure that we reach some goal that we have for the system as a whole. I think the whole point of convenience and charging it in dollars or euros, that's all can be done by third parties, right? But we want to figure something that in general will make sure that people, let's say, release names, or make sure that names that are not performing or not being used or released or things like that. We need to have a general goal on what we want names in general to go to, and then sort of the registrar will simply
So
follow
let's
that.
talk about that.
Yeah.
Let's stop talking about mechanisms.
Well,
Yeah.
actually, I was
No,
going to say.
no,
Wait.
Just is not useful for us to talk about mechanisms in this forum because that is not what we're here for. We need to know what our high-level goals are
Yes.
because we cannot talk about mechanisms unless we know what our goals are.
Well, we should talk about the mechanisms in the context of
No,
goals.
because
How different parameter choices
No.
lead to different outcomes that are goals.
No, because
Right.
mechanisms.
Make the names usable and people will use them. And I think there's always gonna be almost like a Pareto kind of distribution that in any pool of domains, you're gonna have like 5% power users and then like 80% are just parked, squatted, unused, whatever. There's nothing you can do about that. But lead the charge with usable use cases, right? Like, and things, and the thing, this is why, you know, I'm here and got really excited about it because it's Ethereum, because it's blockchain. We can actually go way beyond what traditional DNS can do with a naming identifier. We can really get crazy with it. If we do that, then those use cases are going to drive adaptation, and they're going to drive uptake, and it's going to be like.
I'm very unclear. I thought this session was supposed to be about the economics.
It's
Not about what we wanted in the name registry, or about how to name the result.
sure, but presumably the goal is to build a crypto economic system that it
Produces what
achieves
we
the goal
want, yeah,
for
in a
what.
usable way. I
So-
agree.
so-
But
It's fine to
But-
talk about we want 2% of the domains to be released every month,
maybe,
but not how.
no, so what I want to say,
That's.
we want to say
the
is
thing
something
that I
like this,
think-
right? There's like a fee for participating in some kind of auction mechanism and a deposit that like you need to hold for some amount of time and some rent that you need to pay for some while your thing is registered. And now we have like 4 parameters. And then we can talk about like if you have higher fees, what does that do? If you have lower fees, what does that do? If you have an auction mechanism that's easier or harder to use, less or more optimal. If so that it needs to concretely impact the usability story, the story for our goals, right? Maybe we want to have valuable names available to participants who like are going to make the most value out of them, or maybe we want a huge number of names to be registered. And those are kind of like
What's the
contrary.
Because
Valuable.
I think that has a completely different answer here in this context than it did back in 2002, and the guy who registered sex.com had a valuable name.
Yeah. So
And now, whoever registers sex.eth, and maybe not,
Maybe not. I mean,
because of what.
I mean, that's my thing, and that's why I like at the beginning was way more concerned about squatting than I am now. And like we got squatted, like let's be clear, like, and I really just don't. I'm just not as worried about it because I think that what's happening right now is everyone is going to try to find like their get rich quick scheme because that's why a lot of people are here apparently. And then they're going to realize that okay, I can't just like hold a domain and flip it. Like I just can't. Nobody wants to buy that because the reality is like people like me when I started a company, I didn't start like EtherWallet because EtherWallet wasn't available as a .com. Like we got my EtherWallet because it was available as a .com for under $10. That's why we're named the way we are, okay? And like we built a brand around that, and that's the reality. It's like we could have spent the $1,500. We could have gone and tried to negotiate with people to get EtherWallet.com, but we didn't because like you can build a brand around anything, okay? So with the squatters, like. They're gonna get their generic names, but the reality is like look around at the biggest people that you know in this space, and none of them are just like a word. Okay, like you don't like you're not Wallet, I'm not either Wallet. Like we're all like we have names and we have brands.
The brand
So-
defines the name.
Right. And so then that, in my opinion, goes back to the disputes and stuff rather than the squatting issue, which we've talked about. I don't want to go there again, but like, for the squatting issue, I think what we're gonna see is we're gonna see companies that buy a bunch of names with the intention of making a profit, okay? And now there's 2 ways that this can go. They can do nothing, and then they cannot sell their names, and then they will lose money, and they will not be a sustainable business, and they will stop doing that, or they will find a way that adds value to the ecosystem, to the user, to the name, whatever. And by what I mean by that is allowing people to pay in US dollar, allowing people to automatically re-register, handling the entire auction mechanism from beginning to end. And that's the thing is that if somebody wants to go and get really good at these auctions and buy these domains and then sell them at a slight markup of what the market's willing to pay for that, I don't think that as like in terms of the ENS is not responsible for like policing that. Do you know what I mean?
Nor can it directly, right?
Right.
It has like only indirect levers which have the effects on all market participants, not just squatters, right?
Right.
And
We
I
should get the goals up so they can sit down.
just to say, I think that's a false dichotomy though, because I think owning each name is an individual monopoly on that name.
Right.
You don't have to add anything to the system to make a profit. You can take a name and resell it to somebody for 10 times what you bought it for, and not benefit the wider system in any way whatsoever, and still.
Right, and that's the question. Do you think that people are going to buy? Do you think that the people that have bought 100 names or 200 names and spent that money and locked up that name and spent the gas that's gone forever, are going to make a profit at the end of the day?
I don't, but I don't think that the system intrinsically means that they won't. Like, I think that they, just like I think that somebody betting on this particular horse is going to lose, that doesn't mean that everyone who bets on horses loses. I think that
Virgil told me something yesterday, which was very interesting, but I never noticed this. He said that ETH is the 60th largest TLD.
it's actually the 24th largest.
Jesus
new
fucking
TLD
Christ.
now.
So I mean, okay, the whole point here is we want to make Ethereum,
24.
we want it, we want it to be a force. We want it to be viable, and if a bunch of portfolio amassers come in, and suddenly being the 24th largest TLD in the world means something when you're not even in the legacy route. Okay, that's
Not if
fucking
you don't have a
big deal.
single user resolving any names on it.
Well, that's the use
and
case.
hey,
So make
I'll
some
say
use
this,
cases
how-
that drive
People do use
I
it.
do want to say, I don't think that the metric for names not being resolved is a good metric for squatting, because my wallet does not automatically resolve your name right now.
I don't even resolve.
No,
Like,
right.
we don't even have a button, you have to go do it on the contract.
Right,
side.
but my argument is that everybody who set a resolver did so with the intention of using the name for something. So
Yeah, but
it
I'm saying
provides
that everyone who didn't set the resolver, I have at least 10 people in my inbox right now that are literally waiting for me to make a button for them.
Right,
It's
but
so
what I mean,
early in the process
what I mean
that I
is-
think a lot of people intend to use the names and they just don't know what to use.
but what I mean is at least 12% of users are not squatters. The remainder are either squatters
I
or
can
not.
all by
And
that.
I'm actually pretty pleased with 12% for
Well, just because
honestly,
It's
yeah.
probably higher than .com.
yeah, probably.
You have to check if any of those are price listings.
I want
There's no way of
to
linking prices.
toss one more thing into the mix, which is that right now, the people who have bought up large swaths of names may also be our solution for users being able to buy names in one go.
Yeah.
And we don't have to actually fix that at the registrar level,
Yeah.
because a secondary market of already owned names does allow for names to be purchased at flat prices.
So there is at least one,
prices.
there is a,
No, because here's the thing. In the normal world, the people who are selling domains get to do stuff like dynamically price them and things. But in our world, we can set up systems where the name is for sale and you can't muck around with it because it's for sale in a smart contract rather than in a traditional web way. And you can just buy it flat out in a.
But its price would still be jacked up.
But you
Not necessarily, because they don't know who's looking for what. Yes, they may dynamically price things, but it is not.
I don't even see an issue with that.
So-
Well, the issue is that
That's
it's
absurd.
just like the deadweight loss in economic terms.
yeah.
Sorry.
The deadweight loss, it's like I mean there's like a
It's like
social surplus versus deadweight loss, kind of it's kind of like a there was no corresponding value created for the profit of
So I know that's
of
the,
like that.
Well, that's
The
the
argument,
thing, that
at
I would
least.
argue that the value of a reseller is that they
Solve the problem.
that
Sure, but
they allow someone to literally charge their credit
course,
card and now
the
they have a
entire-
name
yeah,
and
the
all
entire
their
ecosystem.
results.
But there's a big difference between like pricing for that service in a competitive market
Right.
and pricing for that service in a monopolistic market, even though the same value is provided.
so I know that's
I see
the
your
argument of
point,
at least
yeah.
one person who's built a secondary name marketplace, but personally I don't buy it because I don't think that most people wanting to start a business go and browse through a big list of names that person happens to have already bought, looking for one that they can buy and use for it. I think
And this is
most
why I don't
people,
think that they're gonna make I think
Right.
that the secondary market is gonna find out that the secondary market buys like amongst itself, you know,
Yeah, that
about this
means a
like
lot.
imaginary
We start pricing
thing.
But
You know, in this imaginary world that these like names mean something, and then they're gonna realize that at the end of the day, when a new, especially in Ethereum, like when a new brand is started, they're gonna find one and buy it off auction. You know, like that's the thing is that I think a lot of what happened with .com was that people were like buying the names in order for the traffic, right? Like they weren't looking to build a brand; they were looking to build dogs.com because they knew that they just have this traffic. You know, we don't have that same system, and like don't have that same system right now in the regular world, and in Ethereum, like also like really don't. Like if you type like, you know, Ether wallet into your Chrome bar, like it's not going to go to etherwallet.eth. There's no like inherent value for one name over another.
Unless it's already being used.
Right, and then we're back to disputes, not swatting.
in the interest of me sitting down, I'm going to back up and try and get the goals written down. So
Yes.
why do we charge for names? Why don't we just give them all away for free?
Okay, and I think about a level above still. What is ENS for? Right, now as far as I'm concerned, ENS is.
No, hold
Yeah,
on, he's in charge. No, he's in charge right now, and we're gonna do goals.
Well, I think the goal of ENS is consistent resolution. And that's the goal of ENS, okay? We are turning names into addresses. That's what it is doing.
Well, we're turning names into resources, not necessarily
Resources,
addresses.
okay.
Okay.
So it should be, that should be the guiding light.
Right?
If we do something that goes against that, taking the names away from people because we jack up the price of renewal, or taking them back, giving them, using them, it goes against that.
Well,
No,
let-
so
let me
everyone still
challenge-
has consistent resolution.
Let me challenge that for a second. We're not taking names away from people. If we use Vlad's mechanism and set the renewal price such that people surrender a certain percentage of names each quarter or whatever, that's not taking names away from people. People are choosing not to pay the renewal fee because
How
it's
can I
not
can afford the renewal fee?
Yeah. So how
Yeah,
do
what
you
if I'm a legitimate user and
That's
just
an
get
argument
too
against
rich?
any
Well,
form
well,
of fee
you know,
whatsoever.
then you have to.
Except the one that's already been paid.
What's the nature of that mechanism?
But that-
And I would never register, I would never.
So this gets back to the question I was trying to ask. Why do we charge for names? Why not just give them all away for free?
People would not build their brand on a dynamically sliding price domain.
I mean, so they would want to get rid of.
Because they're actually a limited resource, and.
Yes,
and-
scarcity.
So we.
Good job, Piper.
Thank you. We got something on the board.
Yeah.
Why do we have scarcity on the board?
Because
we're not paying attention.
because you weren't paying attention.
Sorry.
Because that is a or the reason why we actually charge for names and don't just give them away for free.
Well, also because, I mean, people don't value what they don't pay for, and if you give them away for free, spammers pick them up in droves and use them as throwaways.
I
Isn't that
know
that
that.
scarcity?
So, no, I don't think that's like, so, just because they're scarce doesn't mean that you can't give them away for free. It means that, if they were traded, they wouldn't be trading for free. But when you're giving them away initially, you know, scarcity doesn't mean that you have to give it away at any particular price.
So .xyz gave away domains for free, and they did 1 cent registrations, and they rocketed up the scale and became one of the largest of the new TLD launches. And it became, like, we just block all .xyz envelopes across all mail servers. And not one single customer has ever complained, right? And we're not the only ones. It's just the TLD is an unusable cesspool of toxic shit. Okay? And their renewal cycle,
And so I think
the train.
so spam prevention, I think, is a much more reasonable reason to charge than scarcity.
Right, so
Because-
limiting abuse of use then.
Well, it's sort of
it's
from both sides.
prevention.
It's one that there is actual scarcity because there are less
There's one
human readable
thing.
names than there are character combinations.
Oh, okay.
And also introducing a certain level of artificial scarcity by adding a cost to it.
So the efficient market thing would be like, okay, it doesn't matter how you initially distribute the names, they'll eventually go to the highest value user, right? And that it would be true if like transaction costs were low and markets were perfectly competitive.
I also think that depends on how you think about the market, because this isn't a market for names. It is 2 trillion markets for one name
That's
each.
right. Yeah. But these, so they're so this is what I'm saying. They're not competitive,
Right.
And they're not efficient,
Yeah.
right? And so probably the initial distribution will affect the distribution at the end And just for behavioral reasons also, right? And so that's one of the reasons why the auction is actually sensible, because somehow it's not just that we charge for a name, it's that we make an effort to give the name to whoever will pay the most, or we try to, and instead give it to whoever was willing to pay the most.
So would you say economic efficiency is a reason?
Well, I think efficiency is a goal, maybe, but what we really want is optimality, which we, which efficiency is like one kind of optimality, and optimality should be in maybe that the names go to the highest value uses, and where the value to me, is the value to the users. I'm not sure if we all agree on what the value of the name is.
Okay, but would you say that efficiency is a goal?
I'm not sure what efficiency means.
Economic efficiency.
So you mean that one? You mean in terms of like pricing in the secondary market?
I mean that by charging for names, we end up with a market that assigns more names, people will use them than if we didn't.
Are we just looking at economic goals here, or
I'm not
We're
sure.
talking about why would we actually charge for names in the first place? Like, why is pricing even a thing that we care about?
Yeah.
So scarcity is not, I think, there are over 128 million .com registrations.
Yeah, but there's a lot more private keys.
Yeah.
Like, otherwise we charge for addresses too, but we don't.
Who's going to use?
Sorry.
I think along the lines of the efficiency where we're going, I think one of the things we've been talking about is increasing utility with whatever the utility looks like, whether that's utility to the owner or the end user, the two are linked together. So I'd say one of the goals by charging is to increase utility, to make sure that the people who own them are actually doing something useful and contributing value to the ecosystem, like utility user.
What about just
I
think we need to launch value.
Right. Exactly.
That's what his website is.
No, you can't charge for it. What about to have you fund work? You don't get value by registering.
I think that's utility, right?
A functional registry.
By charging for it.
Well, I mean, in legacy world, the fees charged are actually used to run the registry.
Oh yes, I think that's I think that's really interesting in a lot of ways, but I think that politically it would be unpopular to say one crowd. Or slash the crazy ICO bro crowd.
It might be, but I think that eventually we're going to get some kind of independent organizations running an ENS.
Yeah, and we're gonna hiring.
I agree with that. Totally. But somehow, I'm not sure how that's gonna happen.
Why is scarcity a goal?
It's not.
No, scarcity is a reason that we would not just give names away for free.
Yeah, why?
Because the fact that names are scarce means that if you do just give them away for free, they don't necessarily get allocated to the people who will actually use them.
No. So, like, if markets are efficient, then it doesn't matter how you initially allocate them, and they will eventually. You can give them away for free.
Established that they're not.
Right, they're not. Right, that's not scarcity. That has more to do with the efficiency,
like a
right?
side effect and not really a goal.
Can you not give them away for free when you'd be losing if you give them away for free? Because
No,
they still need to
the ENS doesn't lose because it doesn't really. I mean, doesn't.
It doesn't gain anything either, right?
Yeah, it doesn't
Like-
gain or lose.
pay to get these names.
I mean, at the moment, ENS doesn't gain anything.
And you don't have to pay either.
Yeah,
You have to pay, in order to like,
You pay gas.
you have to pay a gas fee.
but
Big
that doesn't
ass,
go
yeah.
to the ENS.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm aware that it doesn't, but you're still paying it.
You are, yeah.
Right.
You-
Yeah.
But if we give it away for free, you would still have to pay for the gas.
Sure.
Yes,
Yes, yeah.
that's what I'm saying, is that you can't give them away for free.
Oh, yeah.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
we're allowing
Right.
here transaction fees,
Agreed,
which are extraneous and always going to have to be paid.
Also, there's a risk in the auction.
So,
There's a risk in an auction that you're losing 5% of the bid.
if yes, losing bids are penalised by 0.5%.
So there's some values.
Yeah,
Though that's burned rather than sent anywhere.
So how about, what's the purpose of those goals that you're putting there?
They're not so much goals as reasons why we should consider not just giving them away. Like I'm trying to clarify what the purpose of charging for names
Why do we
is.
need an economic mechanism anyways?
Yeah.
Why can't we just have a first come, first served contract at any color?
Exactly, and once we know why we're charging, then we can actually try and optimize the
Okay, I
goals.
still don't understand why scarcity is an important thing for it.
Scarcity isn't a goal. No, we're not trying to achieve
Because
scarcity.
this is a break.
Scarcity is a thing.
This seems like
These are reasons, not reasons.
It's like a related things.
why is that even a reason?
It's an inherent thing of it, right?
Yeah.
It's just a characteristic of it.
If there was, if me buying a name did not prevent you from buying a name, the same name, then there would be much less reason to actually charge for a registration, because my buying the name wouldn't prevent you from buying it, and therefore I wouldn't be taking a scarce good. So that's what we're trying to get at. I'm going to sit down.
I want to give a potential definition for efficiency. And there's no unrealized gains from a name reassignment.
So you mean effectively a squatter can't make money?
No. Maybe, but that if you might hear in each show, that's equal. I mean, I just mean that there won't. So imagine we have like some map that maps our registry to like some value that it has, and then we like reassign a name, and then that increases the value. Then that would mean that that allocation was not efficient.
Yes. So effectively, looking at it as a hill climbing algorithm, we want to get off the hill.
Yeah, so that's kind of going back to the optimality in general, but here I'm thinking about it actually. So normally the way to think about this is unrealized gains from trade, and so here it's okay. Think about it: unrealized gains from the value transfer, and I guess like the gains are going to be to the owner who are transferring it.
Okay, so what you're saying is that every time there's a slight profit out of selling a name, that's a market inefficiency.
Anytime there's an unrealized profit. So if there's any unrealized profits from selling names, then
So it gains value because it gets more expensive and you pay more money for it.
if you would pay $4 for a domain, which I have to pay $2 for, then the allocation is bad. It would have been.
Agree with that because we can have completely different values.
That's the way, like, so the idea with efficiency is that like people are willing to pay more for something and that was that thing. Like, and so if you're willing to pay more, then I have to pay for that name, and I have like an unrealized profit from giving that name to you. Then that means that like somehow the current allocation isn't efficient.
The system probably should have just allocated the name to you in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. Because then maybe you could have sold you for $2 instead of me for $2, and you won't have to pay $4 for us to get to this efficient state.
In something like this, shouldn't the people who are like first to put their money where their mouth is get some kind of reward from that?
So that effectively becomes first and first served thing, and it just creates a name rush where everyone tries to get the names they think others will want, and then they act as a deadweight loss by charging people what those people are actually willing to pay, as opposed to what it costs them to create the name. And I think this is what sunrise periods on new TLDs aim to avoid.
Well, that's mainly trademark infringement. That's the main thing that they're trying to like avoid is free lawsuits on that.
Okay,
Does it work? Wait, hold on, stop. Does that work though? Like, how is that, whatever the sunrise thing is it efficient at all, or is it just a cluster?
It's a bit of a cash grab is actually what it is, because you have to pay inflated prices to get a sunrise application. If there's multiple trademark claimants, you go into an auction process. They love that. And right, and there are non-refundable sunrise fees. So if your claim gets denied, you're still out the money. So
What was the goal of that? Are we
make
saying
a lot
that
of money.
okay, so yeah, that's valid.
That's what I'm a cynic, but that's what I've said.
So I mean, that's the thing, is like when we're talking about how we're gonna structure things economically, right? I mean, look at systems like that, like, I would say that one of the goals of that program was like to perhaps dissuade lawsuits or limit lawsuits or whatever, but also like you're probably like, this is a good chance to make some money, Like,
Yeah, ostensibly
so-
to protect the trademark.
yeah.
Well, it's also similar to what Vlad was saying. I think if you allocate names in a way that then immediately after allocating them you get a dispute process that's settled in favour of somebody else, then you should have just allocated it to that someone else in the first place. The sunrise process conserve to make sure that someone else
There's
gets
less
the name.
disputes later on.
Yeah.
See, I think the sunrise process can probably be done better, and I think the auction thing, if there's like a trademark component in there, can get into that area, and then I think the trademark clearinghouse process is a lot fairer in spirit as well, where you can assert your rights without having to be gouged through the nose.
Okay, so what's the difference between the clearinghouse?
So the
and
clearinghouse, you don't actually get the names, but you can put your name into a clearinghouse. This was when like the TLD expansion happened and like 1,400 new TLDs came out.
Okay.
So you put your name into the clearinghouse and say, I don't want to try to register 1,400 new, my name in 1,400 TLDs. But what I will do is if somebody else tries to get easyens.top and I'm in the clearinghouse, then they're gonna have to get an additional step where they say, I acknowledge EasyDNS's rights to this name for this category of use, and my use is not going to infringe on their trademark. And then so later I have a mechanism. If you set up a domain registrar after that, then I can say, you already acknowledged my rights and you're infringing on them, so you're in violation of your contract. The implementation was really bad because each registry provider had their own trademark clearinghouse, so you didn't get into all 1,400 if you went in, and you had to go into multiple trademark clearinghouses, and they only lasted but the implementation was horrible. So,
but it was a good concept.
But it was a good concept, so
Okay.
I think something like that is possible, right? But that gets back into the dispute resolution part, not.
I mean, I just find these things interesting because, like, we all agree that the DNS is not very efficient. We all agree that the ENS aims to be more efficient,
But it's not very efficient.
but it's not very efficient right now either. So I think that we should look at how other people have tried and failed and succeeded and
Virgil
how
just
so.
said, Oracle for registered word marks.
The problem I have with any sort of automated solution like that is it's far too easy to obey. So Nike may be a registered word mark, but that won't stop you from registering Nike shoes. Because it was the first trademark that came to mind.
No, it's buy Nikes.
Oh, right.
So there's sort of a theme here, and I'm gonna hopefully get to it, but right, so like TLDs are based in a jurisdiction for the most part, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't have that. So we effectively cannot satisfy any jurisdiction because we cannot satisfy all of the jurisdictions because we have all of these different competing laws and rules and everything. So there's a pretty good chance that we're not going to be able to establish at least not right now, because we're talking about like a legal nightmare. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, I play one on TV, but it's a legal nightmare to try to come up with rules because there's no set of rules that we're actually trying to fit. We're talking about market efficiency, but whoever said it is right. We're not actually talking about one market. We're talking about 180,000 different markets, right?
More than that, because there's all the other registers now.
Okay, so we're talking about a whole bunch of different markets, and then we talk about value, but we can't even actually talk about value because value of names is we've at least talked about three main different subjective directions in which you can look at value. Are they property? Are they marketing tools? So what I keep coming back to in my head is that all of these things that we're talking about things that we probably shouldn't do at the core level because there isn't a clear way to do them. And so what I keep coming back to is that the thing that we can do is figure out a system that is easy to understand and does have clear rules in terms of how does ownership work and how do I know how it's going to work in the future. And all of this other stuff about like, should we prevent squatting? I'm getting to the point where my thought is we shouldn't care at all about squatting as long as we have this basic thing in place, which is a level of artificial scarcity based on there being a price of any kind for names. And that price being low enough that it's not a big deal for just about anybody to grab themselves a name.
Grab 1,000.
Or grab 1,000. And maybe that's fine. And the one thing that I have come to, and this doesn't even, I keep moving all these things to, okay, cool. This might be a good idea, but we should not do it at the ENS level. This might be a good idea, but we should not do it at the ENS level. And the thing around this entire squatting thing is, okay, yesterday we talked about, okay, maybe we should build a blacklisting solution or a darklisting solution on top of this thing. Because that works pretty, like, if we can build something that's sort of unopinionated in a certain way, or maybe just opinionated in the right ways, then maybe everybody will use it. And that's a pretty good thing to have, is to have everybody using roughly one list, if we can build a good list. So maybe what we need to talk about here is, can we build the foundation for a secondary market on top of ENS, not with very unopinionated rules about it, so that we aren't solving the squatting problem, but what we are doing is making it so that those who are squatting have a common market in which names can transition to the people who want them the most, rather than having a massively fragmented market with 100 different squatters and 100 different markets that are all incompatible with each other.
Right.
So,
and that would increase competitiveness, which would then like get the market to be more efficient.
There
right?
might be others.
to touch the second one.
I feel
There
like
might be
name
others.
squatting should be a non-issue. We decide like
No, no,
when it was called it
This isn't even about squatting.
If you want to pull names like
No, sorry. And I'm not actually suggesting that we're solving a squatting problem. It's more like increasing the efficiency and utility of names, because when you want one and it is available, you don't have to go dig through 100 different places to find out who has it. There is a very clear path through signaling that a name is available and acquired.
So you were just saying owner's problem. You were just saying that you keep thinking that things shouldn't be built as part of ENS.
I'm not suggesting building this as part of ENS. I'm suggesting-
why is it our job to build it at all?
No.
It's not, but we're talking about where should ENS go. ENS doesn't have to be, like, yes, there is the core resolver in ENS, but the project that is ENS does not have to be only that contract. It can be a couple of other things that we choose as ENS to build on top of it.
Because what's the benefit of this being something that's core infrastructure as opposed to just a third party?
Because it's better for us to have one name registrar that everybody uses than to have 19 competing different namespaces and name registrars.
No, hang on. Why does having a third where did different registrars come in? You were talking about different
Right.
markets.
So I'm saying that if we have one base market that all of the reselling markets are built on top of, then those markets should be better for users
So
than a bunch of different markets. If I want to go buy a name right now, I have to go look at whoever if I'm looking for a name that's already been purchased.
That's actually unlikely that we're going to be able to make a market in ENS that's more efficient.
No,
That's because of the limitation in the functionality of ENS itself, right? What you should be able to do is just type the name.eth into your browser bar or whatever, and you're gonna end up seeing something from whoever owns that name that says, this is how you use this name, or this is how you buy that name, and our job in ENS is to figure out how do we make that possible.
Yeah,
How
so
do we
I'm not
make-
suggesting we go to market. I'm suggesting we enable a market.
Yes.
But how do-
I'm suggesting
what does that mean?
Right now, there's no way for me to signal, for me to mark my deed as up for sale.
But
So
that's-
maybe the deed needs to be changed, the deed contract, so that it's for sale.
But it doesn't. You just hit a resolver and you add some text records or some Lewis records or
But
something.
it don't.
But there's
Okay.
no
Well, no,
spec
because-
for it. There's
Right,
no
but
way.
what's
Stick in a record, so that it can just like,
So what I think Michael is saying, actually, it goes move there to the efficiency, and what Vlad is, but Vlad has a good point in which if the market is efficient enough, at some point, it doesn't matter the initial distribution, people will end up with the names they want, right? So what Piper is sort of saying is a way, he is throwing ideas to the table on how we can increase the efficiency. And maybe one of the ways that can be done, it doesn't need to be on the ENS level, it can be on the resolver level. We could add a buy resolver that every name could signal how much they cost or something like that.
I don't think this is the job of ENS itself to facilitate, and as a side note, it doesn't really increase the efficiency because the extra difference is the dead weight loss. And in an efficient market, you would get the name in the first place, not have to buy it as a secondary.
Yeah. So there's the efficiency of the allocation, and there's the efficiency of the market, and there's a fundamental limit to the efficiency of the market because you can't make names fungible, right? Names are non-fungible, and so they're going to be fundamentally anomalous. You can make more efficient by reducing costs and having standards about where people go and how people place orders, but it's not going to get rid of.
So this might be is like when we.
So I'm not even necessarily talking about changing ENS. We could do this just by writing a spec.
Yeah.
So I think you're very welcome to write a spec, and I think that a standard for selling secondary names would be a fine thing, but I don't think it's relevant to planning the core architecture of ENS, and I don't think it affects one way or another how we should charge for registration.
I think it is if we're trying to create the ultimate efficient market in names to begin with. I mean, we already tried to do this once, okay? So Victory Auctions are very good at finding, so what went wrong?
Nothing, as far as I know.
So we're happy that the price of every name out there is market price of every name.
Wouldn't it be great if I could reopen my deed as a Victory auction? If I could re-auction my name using the
build
original.
a solution to do that right now.
I get it. We can build that on top.
With the addition.
Who's gonna do it? Like that's the thing is that like this is the thing. If you want the ENS to do something, right? If you have a goal and you want to do something, you have two choices. So like let's just say, for example, squatting, okay? You can do two things for squatting. You can either try to put in measures to stop squatting, right? Or you can try to put in measures that like enable people to not have to deal with the squatting, okay? So for example, in this case, right, you can like do all these things that basically try to like prevent people from holding the names for a long time and prevent people from doing this and prevent people from doing that and basically try to get them to give up their name, right? Or you can put a measure in the ENS that enables people to very, very easily and consistently on a single place, you know, enables them, not necessarily that they actually do it, not actually like a market, but it enables them to signal that they're ready to sell their name or that they can restart the auction or whatever. And what that does is it, instead of like trying to prevent people from doing something, it enables people to release their names more frequently with more ease, right? So I have names right now, for example, that like we bought with the intention of doing something with, and guess what, we're not doing anything. Yes, of course I could go and try to sell it. Yes, of course I could go post on Reddit or find a secondary market and do it, right? But the reality is like I'm not going to because the amount of work is greater than the amount of like that I would make, right? And I can't click a release button even.
I'm also not sure if I trust any of the markets out there.
That is too. So I was gonna bring that up is like, you know, we do have to realize that like at this point in time, this space is like there's different levels of trust and like there's people that are greedy, there's people that are untrustworthy, and then there's just bad code. And we're dealing with all of those. So regardless
the solution comes out of this group.
Yeah, I would prefer to enable people to very easily release their names or sell their names or signal they're ready to buy their names. Enable that or enable, you know, a secondary market or whatever. I would rather do things that promote the behavior that we want rather than trying to like reduce or prevent or like stop people. Because like the thing is, whenever you put something in place to like stop people from doing something, their first reaction, even if they're like a rather good person, is like going to try to be to evade it. Like that's just your natural reaction.
But I don't think we're proposing putting something into the this. So
I'm very keen to hear guys behind market for this, who's basically trying to work in that space. What's your intention? What would be the good way to have some, you know, going to the good direction rather than bad direction? Probably
Oh, we really want to sell the names to whichever company has the most utility for it, so we can get a fair price for it. And one thing that's missing right now is a mature market where we can do so. We can try to find these trademark owners, but well, really the market isn't developed enough that we can right now get a price for it. Once that market, the suggestion of having a market within ENS sounds really great to me, because then we can easily auction our names right there.
I think we're arguing over nothing until we actually have some utility for these names. Until you can actually do something with these names, all of this is pointless. Right?
We can do
speculate that if we are speculating, they will have utility, and so
What's that
making
gonna
it
be?
pointless.
What's the utility? Well,
Well,
it's
it's
speculating
it's
about
gonna
that.
happen soon, people buying, and that's why
I like to make the first big one witness.
But then I feel like
Resolving
this discussion is a cul-de-sac for two reasons. One is that there is no point in having a secondary market if we don't have a primary market. We can actually buy and renew the names, which is what we were trying to establish here. And the second is that I don't think by building a secondary market here in this workshop, we can have a fundamental advantage over standardizing it outside the workshop. And I don't think that it's a profitable use of our time personally to build a secondary market here and now. And I don't think we have any particular special insight into building that needs to be done here, because in my mind the goal here is to develop the future of ENS in its architecture and so on, and inform technical decisions that will inform the evolution of the system as a whole. So if there are particular needs that a secondary market has that ENS can facilitate, I think that's a useful thing to discuss, but I don't think we need to be designing one.
I think the point is, it comes back to the efficiency argument, which is that we know that the markets can be incorrect, and we know the markets can change over time. If I've registered random name.eth, and then random company decides it wants to kick off a year from now, obviously the market value of that will change. So I think what we're hearing is that it would be nice for ENS to allow this re-auction system, to allow us to rediscover the price.
Well, it does allow us.
No, inside, I mean, officially inside ENS, it's not back to Alice, what you were saying, it would be nice to actually know the value of deeds. If you buy something for 0.01 ETH and then sell it for 100 ETH, all the ENS knows is 0.1, it doesn't know the 100. So this would allow that to remain.
But there's no reason why people will use it if it's more efficient market.
And as soon as you try and use that information,
There will be.
There will be.
Because you don't need gas.
and as soon as you try and use that information for something, such as affecting price of renewal, then there is an economic incentive for people to deceive the market.
It's the abstraction, and people will figure out a way to get around it. Get around it, abuse it, manipulate it, something. And as soon as I said it, I regret it.
Plus, I guess it's not necessarily our job to fix the efficiency of the second market. It's the job of the people that have a lot of domains and want to sell them. Right? They want to add value. They want to.
But surely our job is to get the domains that people are going to use them at a fair price, so they can actually start doing something useful with it.
The initial distribution, not the secondary market.
Okay, but say, okay, can I ask this then?
No, not
I have
much, not for
six domains that I don't want, what do I do?
Or unlock.
Like,
honestly.
I think you wait for the secondary market to mature. So the
But then why are we, if that's the answer, right? If your answer to me is like, then go wait for the secondary market, why are we talking about any of this?
Because there's other problems, like for example, the initial allocation.
Yeah.
Like things, and the secondary market is affected by the dynamics of the primary market, and so like, and for example, if you have to pay a fee to maintain a domain, then somehow
But I just said I don't
really will
want the
affect the
domain.
price of these things.
Can you give it up and get the deposit back?
No, you can't, right now, you
So you
can't.
only wait 1 year.
Yeah.
But I think it's I just think,
You
okay,
don't need to read this right now.
So the long term, so this is something that we can talk about, which is when we replace the current registrar, what changes to the deed should we make? Should you be able to release it? I mean, that's a.
So part of the design of the current registrar requiring a minimum lockup period was to prevent speculative registrations. The cost of owning a domain is your capital cost of locking up that money over the time you're locking it up. If you could win an
I
auction,
don't even want my money back though. I literally have to hold the domain for a year and I can't. And so when we're talking about, we're talking about efficient markets and we're talking about not wanting squatting, you want the utility of these names to be great. I'm saying that if that's our goal, if that's something that we're striving for, the current system, literally, there's nothing that I can do right now in this moment to move my domains from me beyond reaching out personally to people and asking them if they want this domain.
It's because there's a secondary
That's a
market.
feature.
Yeah.
At the moment, that's a feature. It's
At
not-
one point, your market will match you with these people, and then and help you make that be escrow.
More-
Yeah.
I just want to point out that the initial allocation of the name, the utility changes over time. So what perhaps you might want to do is incentivize or create a secondary market. I know that's not what we want to talk about now, but the utility changes over time, and therefore, if you want to allocate the name appropriately, you need to do that in the secondary market because the initial allocation will happen as quickly
Of course, but we need to incentivize that to happen and make it possible to happen in the ENS design, right? So the incentive right now to deregister a name is that you want your ETH back, right? If your capital costs are 0 or even like negative because like you think it's safe there, then you don't really have an incentive to do that, right? You don't need, so somehow right now there's really not that much incentive to deregister. We could have more incentive to deregister, which would put people on the market more often, right? Right now, you might have a position where you can't deregister, but you could transfer it, right? So you usually transfer to someone who will transfer it further. So I'm not sure that will change actually like that much, but it may help.
I mean, for a domain that I bought for 0.01 ETH, it's actually, I have no incentive to do anything.
Fine.
Like,
But again, that's just waiting on maturity.
So are deed changes a topic that we
Yeah,
should talk
absolutely,
about?
yeah.
So-
So can I finish what I was saying about 5 minutes ago about why there is a lockup period? And that's because the cost of registering a name is your capital cost over the time duration you have it. If you could immediately relinquish a name after winning the auction, then your cost to win any auction you like would be effectively 0 as long as you have the original capital. So some sort of minimum lockup period is necessary.
Or we just charge
Otherwise-
money, like real money, like
Yes.
actually have a real cost.
And I personally actually quite like your proposal of setting the renewal price so that it encourages a certain number of domains or certain percentage of domains to be relinquished each year. I think that's a good way to find the economic equilibrium.
Yeah, and what goes back also to the utilities, one of the things I would, looking at the table there, one of the things I think it's useful is that for a user, it's important for them to be able to buy a name. They want a name, they type a name, it's not available, and they make 1 or 2 variations, and eventually they will find a name.
Yes.
If every single name they find is locked up or is very high or they can't get, then the ENS in the whole isn't very useful. So one of the reasons to charge money, one of the reasons actually that scarcity is a good thing is that we want users to be able to buy domains. And then I like and that goes back to Vlad's thing, where I like the idea where what we want to encourage is for people to release names so that there is always a percentage of names that are available for re-registering. I think it's important.
And I think one way to look at it is that if you rank names by how much they're worth to their current owner, we ideally want to set the renewal cost at the point where you don't renew it if it's worth less to you than whoever else would like to buy it. So if the renewal cost is too low, you will buy a name even though it's no use to you at all on the speculation that it may be useful later. And if it's too high, you may give up a name you actually want to use because it's too expensive. But if it's at the right point, then you give it up when it's no use and somebody else has the opportunity to grab it. And I think it's a bit fuzzy, I guess.
So I think this is a good high-level thing that we might actually be able to agree on is that one of the changes that we need to make for the permanent, not registrar,
Yes, registrar.
is that we need to move from a purely deposit-based thing to a cost, and with some incentive for deregistration.
Which is non-deposit based.
Yes.
So
deregistration incentive, that there's an actual monetary incentive to deregister, and it actually costs money
To register.
What about if you're gonna deregister? I'm really uncomfortable with that, like, just trying to target deregistrations that are raising price, because I would never build my brand on a name that's gonna like be a complete targeted price.
You're already assuming it's a moving target. You're already assuming that it's unpredictable. I don't think it might be unpredictable, but it might be something that by the beginning of the year, you 1 year in advance, you already know what is going to be your fee.
Well, I think
And also I'll sell you insurance.
And I think, yes, that's a good point. I think that can happen. And I think also that you, a sense of registrar will let you pay in advance for a reasonable interval. If you want certainty, you can register 5 years in advance, and it's like buying an house.
Yeah, prepaid rent.
You know, comms.org, they go up every year now, it's baked into the contract. But it's a fixed amount, and we know how much it's gonna be.
It's fixed amount in which currency?
Base currency to register, so most of them are US dollars.
So
Yeah,
I think this is a non-issue because of two reasons. One is that I suspect that the price would not exactly level out, but level out into a predictable enough pattern. Two, that we can tweak the parameters if it's flying in the wrong directions or things like that. And three, I said two things, but here we are, three. Three, that yes, people who will manage your domain for you can take the volatility out of the system and in doing so add value to the system.
And I think it's reasonable to assume that any adaptive system like this will be tuned to adapt quite slowly.
Yes.
So
Yes.
if, you know, it might take a whole year for the price to double, you know, for instance, if it was headed in that direction, because it reacts quite slowly.
I really think though that the whole fear around name squatters taking up all the good names, like, from experience, is not like.
This is not based on fear of name squatters taking up all the good names. This is adding very small mechanisms so that the names with no utility are released. That's it.
Yeah,
It's just
about utility.
just the
How do you
names.
define no utility?
No. Everybody gets to define that themselves. All that we've done is set a very arbitrary small bar that says there's at least a point in which the utility drops to zero, because right now there is no point in which the drop.
But if you had a
even
flat
switching to
renewal
a
fee,
cost
you would still have
model
that.
might do that.
Absolutely, but we have the ability to do something slightly more maybe intelligent.
And in fact, we don't have the price to a flat renewal fee unless you don't raise the
Yes, and we don't have stable points, so we can't do a flat renewal fee.
Okay, anyone who works globally knows that exchange rates move around, right? So if you pick it on ETH, then
Ether moves around a lot more than the exchange rate.
I'm pretty sure my ETH is the same amount of ETH it was yesterday.
I'm pretty sure it varies more than my dollars and your pounds.
Yeah, but I'm not looking at that, right?
Okay, can we chalk that
Oh,
up
goody.
to?
So we're all sitting here, I'm still
problems
thinking
that
about
can't
it in
solve?
terms of dollars.
Look, the issue with a flat rate is not even about volatility. It's really about just setting arbitrary things, right? 0.01 is the minimum price. I hate that because it's completely arbitrary.
Sure.
I decided at some point let's use that number. And I don't think that's a good solution. I don't think any solution that fixes at a fixed Ether price or a fixed dollar price or a fixed euro price will be a good solution. There's always some market that.
Why is that worse than a 2% of people we want to get over the bar of renewing? Or, you know, if we have a magic number, it's a magic number, we can justify it, but it's a magic number.
Because my thing will eventually adjust no matter what the price changes are.
Because a fixed price is an open loop system and there's no reason to reach any sort of equilibrium.
I get all this, but it has the benefit of simplicity. Like we said, 5 years, 10 years from now, if the renewal rate is a flat amount or a percentage of the D value, then people know what they're going to be paying.
So it's simple
I
and
give
it's
3
predictable,
reasons why
but
they can
it's,
still know.
3 or 4.
well, hang on. It's simple and predictable, but it's also saying the price of a house 5 years from now. And I mean, sure, it was nice that we know that it's still 0.01 ETH, but it's not so nice that nobody can afford to buy a domain now. How many reasons?
I know, mine.
Actually,
some number of reasons.
Yeah, but I don't know, I'd suggest that
number.
we don't, and also, we don't have to zero in on what the solution is right now. We can hash that out in an EIP and a whatever. I think, is there any disagreement that we should add?
I don't know what it is.
Is there any disagreement? Yeah. That we should add a mechanism that incentivizes releasing names below a utility level that is yet to be determined.
So I would rather rephrase. Let's say like there is an incentive mechanism, that provides an incentive to deregister, even for people with capital cost of 0. And
You're never gonna incentivize someone with a capital cost of 0 to do
you are. The capital cost is the cost of borrowing or the cost of, it's not the actual cost of money.
No, I know, but it's still their capital.
A straw poll, who believes that registering a name should cost something?
Oh, yeah.
No, wait, what do you mean cost something?
I don't think it should necessarily cost them, right? I think something
Here's the thing, because Piper said something, and it felt like it was an agreement, and it's about payment versus deposit versus locking up, right? I think I'm uncomfortable with the idea of moving into something where you pay, and there's a good reason for it. I think one of the great things about locking the money up is that it doesn't go to anyone, right? The moment you start paying the money to something, either it's going to be burned, and a lot of people will start looking, oh my God, it's going to be burned. Let's imagine all the good things that could be done with it. So maybe let's go
Let me just answer your question. I mean cost in the sense that economist means cost. Anything that reduces your ability to do something economically.
Okay, so before you
so there's a very, so we can solve this. We can solve this by requiring people to just increase their deposit every year.
Right.
Like that's fine. We don't have to burn money, but we can still make.
We really should burn money.
So the second straw poll. Second straw poll. Who believes that retaining a name should cost something?
So what?
Retaining a name should cost something.
Even if the capital costs are zero.
Well, well, no, just that it should cost something.
Okay, but I
more
want
specific later.
Okay, fine.
But here's the thing, capital cost being 0. I think that's weird.
No,
right?
I mean, even negative for some people.
Here's the thing, right? I think that once you finish your job and Casper is working, right, people will be able to get interest out of staking things. And I think,
but I'm not providing financial derivatives except for people to stake.
And that's not even right? That's not even exclusive to Casper. I really believe that as the whole market matures, there will be opportunities where you can give money to someone and get interest.
So we have huge asymmetries in capital costs. But there's no, like, people don't agree on the, I mean, there's the price of lending ETH on Polo, there's the price of lending ETH on this.
Suggest we sweep that under the table and pretend it doesn't exist because we can't solve it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with
Yeah, we
that.
so let's just not use the mechanism. Like let's just replace deposits with fees and then everything goes so much better.
That's an EIP discussion that we should have later on an EIP where we can hash this out without yelling over each other. because it doesn't matter, because what we're talking about is, should we add a mechanism that when we squint our eyes and look through a piece of fuzzy glass looks about like this?
But we already talked about that.
No, we don't.
No, you don't. Because first of all, it broke as soon as the soft launch period ended. Because 99% of domains are now sold, 99.5% of domains now go for the fixed minimum. So we no longer have price discovery mechanism, and we don't have a renewal.
Well, I mean, you do, it's just 0.1 ETH, or it's less than 0.1 ETH, or 0.1 ETH is the price.
How about this? How about this? How about this? We have a mechanism. I'm unsatisfied.
And that's reasonable, right? There's no competition with the names, so the price should be very low.
Yeah.
We have a mechanism.
But actually,
I'm not
we don't know
satisfied.
that that's the price. That's a really good price. The price is way lower than 0.01.
Yes. So that's the point. We don't have a price.
We do have a price.
Discovery mechanism.
Well,
Okay,
tell us the price is less than 0.01.
so we don't have it again.
So like, so I'm, I mean,
But, I mean,
I'm
the
not
other
sure.
thing is that I think one of the problems is that, like, everyone bought all their domains, and everyone, like, lost some money and got bored with it, and was like, okay, that was exciting, and now I'm moving on to the next thing or whatever, right? And so now everyone's just, like, buying names. Who's buying names today? Like, I'd really like to do user research on that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, okay, so for example, I have not bought a name in a couple weeks. Actually, no, I did, but then I didn't reveal it because I forgot about it. So like literally, and no one else bid on that name, so I can like probably at some time in the near future go and like, you know, rebid on it and I'll get it and that'll be fine, right? Who else is buying names right now? Is that it?
I got one.
Did you buy one?
Yeah, I can't tell you what it is though.
you haven't really secured it.
You bought like in like the last like couple weeks, you bought 2 names? Okay, and then what was the use case for them? Like were they just like,
We have an app.
so you just keep coming up with names and needing them for your app?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. See, that's reasonable
Does
because
your app actually use the name?
Will.
It will.
Well, when more clients support ENS, assuming that.
I did it for my token, so like
Yeah.
we had a hackathon.
We did
We
like
issue a event token which get given to all the participants, which I had a username for Break the Block, which was a hackathon name, and I had a token subdomain.
Okay.
So like when I gave the card, people can just actually look into it by going to ESA scan.
Yeah.
Token, that's
And I registered a name during the hackathon as well, and then forgot to review.
I bought
I think that
I bought a name I bought Web3.js because I was building an app and then I realized that in order to, I was building another app and I had to host Web3.js somewhere and I went, oh, I should probably host it in Swarm. And then I realized I didn't have any Web3.js related names.
okay, so what I'm hearing is we have people that have a specific use case for their names now, right? Like every single one of these examples was some external event sparked me to realize that I needed this name for X utility, for X purpose, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, but that's very different than what we've seen in the last, you know, go back 3 weeks, as we did the soft launch, right? That's very different. People were not, I can tell you 2 names that I bought out of like 50. Okay, I bought with like actual utility. Okay, the rest of them, like I bought every username that I've ever had to have them because that's like what I do.
But didn't you buy those with utility in mind, that you might want to use them to identify yourself?
Well, I mean, the thing, let me ask you this. Do you think that like I'm ever gonna link like my personal like ETH address with like my Tavano username?
Why not?
Maybe. You might like.
But then you guys would all know how much money I have.
No, that's your magic thing.
Right, and so that's why all of my addresses are like random little things, like the hold your ETH and the, you know,
Well,
Yeah.
for a
like
month,
random
you can,
things.
if there were single people buying 1,500 domains and like emailing us about it when the first few weeks of the year, it's like people were buying whatever names they could think of that people might be able to use.
So I think that the
Or that I might, like, for me, it was like, I might want this name.
Anybody might
So-
have they're like,
Prevent
things
any
wanted
of
to
that.
do that, they were like, I'm gonna think
No,
of it,
but
literally, there's people bought stupid.
its
stupid
goal was
misspelled
always to
names.
reduce the economic advantage of squatting on names by making the squatters pay as much as the next most dedicated squatter.
But did it actually help? Did it happen?
Yeah.
It's difficult
So you
to
look at the
say.
names, like most of them are gone already.
But if we, imagine if we had
But
no,
they-
imagine if there was no option and no
Most of them are
deposit.
dictionary names.
Imagine
Yeah,
if
but
there was no option
most
and no
dictionary
deposit.
names are gone, but are very expensive.
Way gone,
So
way more
it's
gone.
hard for the squatter to make money in the future, right? So I'm
Depending on your
okay,
technical goals.
if someone spent 100 Ether in a name, and it's a generic name, I'm happy that they.
Okay, so anyways, so my point is this, is that the original reason people were buying names and the purpose of which they were buying the names is very different than what people are buying today. Right, like you can agree on that, that's
I
a
agree.
big difference. Okay, so today, not talking about like the initial launch, but today, how do we want that, like what do we want that to look like? Because what I'm hearing is that we either have people that, well, let me ask you this, why are you buying names? Like what names are you buying?
Well, the same kind of names we bought during the soft launch, but
Okay.
names we overlooked are still available. and with the same reason as investment to sell them later to someone else.
That makes sense to
That always
me.
happen, yeah.
That makes sense to me. I don't have a problem
So
with
I don't think there's a big change in the nature of name registrations post soft launch. I think just that there was a lot of pent up demand for people both wanting to buy names speculatively and to buy names for projects they already had. And that now post soft launch you see a trickle because it's the people who are coming up with new projects, all things they overlooked earlier, that they still want to register.
Okay, so how many, like, let's go around the room and say, like, how many names do you guys register in, like, the first, like, what was it, 6 weeks?
8 weeks.
8 weeks. About how many names do you guys register and with what purpose?
Raise your hand if you registered under 5.
Under 5?
Registered under 10.
They're all my addresses.
You can keep your hands up as we go. Under 20. More than 25. Like, I'm around the.
More than 100,000.
So we're looking at most people in this room registering between 5 and 20 names. Like
Most people in this room were not name spotters.
Yeah.
We had someone in our house that bid on 400.
Yeah.
You guys are
Yeah,
20?
Sure. Over 100.
Yeah, over 100.
Over
Yeah, I think it-
over 500.
No.
Over 1,000. Alright, so I don't think it's useful for us to talk about squatting, just in general.
I disagree.
I
I because we decided that people can name squat. Like if you wanted to reserve names for people, you could have reserved names for people. Like that's not what happened. Like,
if we discuss about utility, then it doesn't matter about name spotting.
yeah.
I think the whole point of the some sort of renewal fee or something like that is that you force people to think about the utility of the name. So do I really want to keep this name or do I want to release it?
That's a useful conversation.
Okay, and
Yeah,
that's
because that
right.
extends beyond name spotting. That extends to Taylor's names that she's not using.
Right, that's what I'm trying to get at, is like, we're talking about this, all this registration fees and all these things and how to incentivize people, right? Incentivize people to release their names, and I'm saying right now, at this very point in time, you can't, like, you're not even enabling people to release names.
What does release names mean?
Like, I don't, like,
How many people want it
let me
anymore?
put this back in the open world for anyone to grab it.
I'm talking about incentive.
Like, what if I didn't need?
Use their names, like to actually do
That's
stuff.
something else.
Well, that's
actually,
the valid too, but that's the thing, is like,
we could do both.
I think those two things are tied together.
Yeah.
Like if you incentivize someone to use a name, it's the same thing as not incentivizing them to get rid of it.
Yeah.
Like it's.
And I think the goal is to incentivize people to use the names and to give them up if they're not.
Yeah, but I mean, incentivizing them to use the name is something that you build tools around, right?
You do
Every time you just use the system.
That's the
But
ecosystem.
you
Also, just by just by having the name cost something on a recurring basis, it will mean that like if they don't feel like they're making more value than that.
I thought it would be though, the ENS registry, I keep using the word registry just in that context, like, bottom, where it's, the purpose was to build like a protocol around this so that, that ecosystem can get built on top.
Yes.
So that it's like, okay, here's how we're gonna map between these naming identifiers and these resources, like Ethereum addresses, swarms, all that, and bridge to the legacy DNS so we can pin those in there and whatever else we can think up that might not even be on the radar now. And so, there's this advantage to using an ENS name that is unique unto itself, and it's like, wow, you can do this, and we can do this, and we can map this to this, and people can just do this, and this happens over here, and that gives the value to the names. That incentivizes everybody to, come to the table and say, well, how do I get my name? How do I sell this name to the best person to have it, and that sort of thing. And I don't know if that's happening right now.
I think that is happening. I think that's just the long, slow road. It's the clients and all the other software in the ecosystem gradually building out, people adding new resources that can be resolved with ENS. That's the long game.
I mean,
it's not like we're gonna come up, we're gonna be like, wait a minute, using it. You know, it's like no, we're gonna be continuously coming up with things.
So what about the use case that I'll never make any money off of any of my ENS names. I use them to label my accounts, but it's easier for me to not remember my addresses.
Yep.
But I'll never make money off of it. So if it costs me more every year, but I want to keep them. I want my name.
So
Pay for that utility.
So a goal
Yeah,
of
but it's
a goal of
raises every year. There's a point in which it sucks.
Yeah.
so it doesn't. I'm not saying that. I don't think we're saying that it should raise every year, but that it should follow some. It should be involved in some sort of feedback system that pegs it to its actual utility. And I think that yes, that is an important criteria. The cost of owning a name has to be lower than the utility value of using a name just to identify your wallet or somewhere someone can send you money. That's a good benchmark for whether this is successful or not.
So here's another thing, kind of statement. If the higher the cost of keeping a name, the more the names that are actually registered are going to be efficiently allocated. But there could be a lot of lost value due to the lack of registrations that would be useful.
Exactly.
But that higher cost will mean that you have to justify it harder to have a name, and therefore the actual registrations that are going to exist are going to be be better, right? Because a squatter needs to have many domain names and can't afford to pay for all of the different domain names as high fee, right? And so unless someone's actually getting use value directly out of that name that is bigger than its high fee, they won't keep it around. So the higher the fee, the recurring fee, and I'm not talking about you listed capital cost, the more efficient the name registration, and the lower the fee, the more we get, the more registrations we get, right? And so we want to find the Goldilocks.
So just one good thing. So Nick, I don't think that just using the name of your personal wallet is such a great benchmark, because that's one use case where you can totally you could totally just own a name and create 1,000 subdomains, and then you only pay one registration fee. And it comes to a point where, okay, at some point, why should Bob use Bob.if for that? If maybe there's some better use of Bob when Bob could just
use Bob.wallet or
Bob.wallet.
Your value, the value of your name to you is not going to be I might look at the value that you think your name is and be like, that's not worth anything.
But we decide that collectively. Each person decides whether it's worth it to them to keep it. And I think you're right that most people will register subdomains, but I think it's a reasonable benchmark that it shouldn't be unaffordable if you're a geek and you decide you want to
own
go
one
out
name.
to own
One name, yeah. So if you're a geek and you want one name, that should be fine, no matter how poor of a geek you are. But if you're a geek and you decide 10,000 names.
Yeah. So who here would be prepared to pay $10 a year to own a vanity name that they can point at their wallet address?
Yeah, but you're already, who would have been willing even when they were in grad school or sometime in their life?
But it's sort of like the old domain system is like that, right? That's sort of the benchmark.
Is that a bad thing?
No, that's a good thing.
Not necessarily.
But the renewal fee should be an order of magnitude lower than the minimum fee for putting it out to auction and rebuying it yourself if you're the only one actioning. So it shouldn't be. It should be an order of magnitude less than 0.1. Because otherwise you're incentivized to just release it, not renew it, and rebuy it.
No,
and then you lose the usability
you put
because
your own risk if you do that. So you have a auction. And if it's the same, I mean, what if it was just the same? It costs the same to renew for a year as it does to.
But,
I
understand the $10 sort of benchmark. I know it's hypothetical, but then what about sub-Saharan Africa or something?
Even $5 per year per name is probably a huge help.
I am inclined to think the subdomain solution allows us to come at this problem from a higher, with a solution of a higher base cost for domain names, if we actually care about increasing the efficiency of allocation. Now, this isn't about squatting, it's about increasing the efficiency of how they're allocated.
It just happens to be the squad use internet.
Just happens. Well, it's a piece of it, but also it's the domain names that she owns and that I own, and So this is not about squatting, it's about at what point, there's a big dial we can turn, right? We can turn it way the hell up so that nobody in this room, other than business,
Only consensus.ethan's class.
we can turn that dial all the way up, or we can turn it way down so that every single person in sub-Saharan Africa, or whichever part of the world you want to target, everybody's in Antarctica, can get their own domain name. And I think that based on my understanding and prediction of where I think subdomains are going to go, and just the system as a whole, it might warrant us turning that dial up a little bit higher than the current domain name system, because Bob.wallet is going to be just fine, and it's not the same as the current domain name system of getting bob.googlewallet.com, because you don't actually own my Google Wallet, whereas with subdomains you can actually own them. So
and I feel much more comfortable, even if there's some human intervention there. I feel much more comfortable if the human intervention changes a dial that changes some goal parameter, right? If maybe the goal parameter is how many registration per day, or how many % of the registrations are released, I think that's much better than having some human dial setting the price, right?
We do have both. So if we want to have a feedback system based on percentage of names released, then the percentage is the dial we adjust.
Exactly, but I prefer that you adjust the dial of the percentage and then the price.
Yeah. Oh, I agree.
But
we could set that percentage to 50%, and then we have the consensus.eth plus one other name that gets given up every year. Or we can set it to 0.01%, at which point names are almost free, and and you have a proliferation of them. And I think Piper is arguing for turning it a little bit to the right, so that
and we can start pretty darn low and start moving it up, because the thing is that right now subdomains don't have much utility because the ecosystem is immature. So the idea is that we can start low and work our way up as the ecosystem matures, and as we see that it is maturing in the way that we thought it was going to.
So you're talking about deliberately making them expensive to encourage early maturation of...
No, I'm talking about deliberately starting at about where we're at right now, and starting to take it up a little bit, and to respond. That's it, and to see at what point do we see things, whatever metrics we decide we can measure, at what point do we see things starting to move towards the point where we think they should be.
So I think at this point we basically end up arguing about what our own personal conceptions of the ideal place to put the dial in.
Well, and the idea is that we can circumvent that argument by just picking a safe place to put the dial in a low point.
So too low is safer than too high.
Starting it too low, and then seeing what's happening and starting to move it.
I would be happy if we could just agree that there should be a dial.
Yeah. Straw man poll. Who likes the idea of a mechanism that encourages a release of a certain percentage of names per year?
That is parametric in some dial.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then do we like? Is everyone? I mean, I want to ask also if you like the idea that there should be some proportion of names that are released every month or something to be the target.
Yeah, I mean,
I
think that's what.
That's exactly you said a dial. You didn't say which dial.
That dial. That is the
dial. We're all voting on that dial.
Yeah. You said what encourages the release.
A release of some fixed percentage.
Yes.
Which is the dial.
Yes.
How do you get the time when you handle the draws?
We figured out.
What do you mean?
It doesn't
You
matter.
handle how people who release their names get released for re-registration if it gets released.
So there should be. What do you mean? It should be just like a normal registered name and then a new option.
No,
that's not how it works.
Because we need a lockout period during which the name definitely does not point to anything. because otherwise you surrender your name.
Okay, that's fine.
somebody else-
I'm really happy
So
with
now
that.
what happens in the drop catching industry evolves around the drop process, okay? So if any names of value are dropping, which they will only be valuable if they have utility, but anyhow, once they're dropping, then if they have value, you have the drop catchers swooping in and they'll re-register it within a millisecond, and you have the same complaint because they will create special.
And that's why we
So
like the
I'll have a
option.
little auction, yeah, we'll have an auction.
Well, that's your process. We're just having an auction. That's another.
As soon as anyone opens a bid on any name, it doesn't matter if it was deregistered before or
Can
not,
we-
there's an auction.
I'm still in favour of going to a fixed fee.
Oh, it's crazy.
Hold on, we're
What's
talking
your
about
land
implementation
rush
again, real-
cost thing, and you're releasing names back into that. You could do an auction just for releasing names. That's what I'm
Hold on, we're talking about implementation again, and also we've been talking about stuff for a very long
Well,
time.
technically, we were supposed to be talking about implementation for the last 45 minutes, but I thought trying to call this to a halt was a bad idea, because we were developing some really useful ideas.
Well, and maybe it's talking about what features do we want the implementation to have.
Yeah.
And I have a question on that idea, also about general purpose. If there is such a fee, right, would it be proportional to the value of the name, or would it be equal?
No, same for every name.
No,
Same for
it's the
everyone.
same because we can't, I propose that we can't do market discovery, other than the options.
Well, we have the initial cost of the option, we have the deposit amount.
So I don't think we can, like, if we assume that the current status quo, which is that almost all names go without contention, remains, then in the long run, we should expect that almost every name that you deal with was not sold at auction.
So, I mean,
What about
we
the-
only know that there wasn't, this wasn't, I thought,
Short
one.
release though will be, you'll have the same shit show once you have 5-letter domains released.
Yes, no, I absolutely think that when we introduce new names into the pool, they should be auctioned.
Well, but if you, oh, okay, that makes sense, and if that's how you approach it.
But the
you'll have
ongoing
new names
operation,
Go in,
yeah.
they get auctioned.
Wait,
I don't
new
know.
names
I really,
and
And release name.
release names,
hopefully,
then why not just, why change it?
I think we can change it, but keep it.
Because if 99.5% of names are only bid on by one person, then it's a pretty big inefficiency to make it take 5 days and require
Yeah,
3
it comes down to
actions.
user's education stuff like switching.
Oh yeah, but now we have the alarm clock, so that's gonna be solved.
Yeah, but
Yeah, but it still shouldn't take you 5 It still shouldn't take you 5 days and 3 interactions.
Now, it makes
to
sense
change
when
each
it's
name.
released, especially if they're not disputed and no utility, that like, yeah, you can buy it.
But if there is anyone else who bids, anyone else who also wants that name within some time, there like definitely should be an auction. And the reason why I say definitely is because if we want a better initial allocation and there's multiple people who want it, like, you know, I mean, sealed in second price auction like makes a lot of
But
sense for
say
that.
it's been 3 years since the launch. What do you think the odds are that 2 people within 3 days of each other decide that they both want to register the same name?
So I'm totally cool with
Business
it a couple
types.
weeks, right? And just like anything will wait in a couple of weeks.
Just a second, guys. Hey, hold
I
on.
think that's reasonable.
First,
Well, I just wanted to throw something out there. I don't know if it's feasible, but I would personally prefer a system that lets you get something for releasing a name, as opposed to losing something for keeping it.
Yeah, so
So that's the
I'm
current
thinking that it would be useful for us to talk about the
But that's a little
properties.
implementation.
No, so I think it would be useful for us to talk about the properties of the release and renewal process that we would like to see. Not the specifics of it, but the like things that we want to motivate. So one thing that I've heard is that we want to motivate people to actually like releasing early might be a good thing. That when a name fails to get renewed, we want to make sure that it goes into it, that it dies for a little while, so that it's a security mechanism, right? We don't want somebody to be able to like switch the wallet address seamlessly over and just start like sort of, you know, we want it to be dead for a little while. And that we also probably want the ability for us to have price discovery as that name gets reallocated, rather than just having a sniping industry evolve around sniping up any name gets.
And there should be a auction, because or else we would release your name, get your deposit back, and then snipe it back for, no deposit, deposit.
Right.
So I don't personally view that as a problem, because if you want to take the risk that somebody else is going to snap it up, then you're welcome to take that risk.
But even with that not being a
It's
problem,
totally
there are
asymmetric
still
risk.
other reasons why.
We want price discovery on the release. That's definitely. I don't think anyone wants like an instant buy for a name that had been released.
I agree that in an ideal world it's better than not, but I'm not sure it warrants the complexity of adding an auction mechanism just to deal with release.
We're not adding an auction mechanism, we have an auction mechanism.
Well, except that we're also talking about not using an auction mechanism
Right,
for
that's why I
general
was saying, why are we
registrations.
talking about removing the
I
auction
mean, I
mechanism
don't-
if like for, you know, the only time we're talking about not having auction is these like,
So I
whatever. And if-
propose that we don't remove the auction mechanism and we let the layer on top of ENS solve that problem.
I think we should
Because-
modify the auction.
Because the entire contract is
No, we might need to
right
modify
now.
it so that anybody can do the reveal for you.
I-
By
I-
doing that,
Other things.
it allows me to have an auction initialized so that I will be the owner and to give my reveal away to somebody else who commits to do it for me and pay them to do that.
So I still think that's significantly suboptimal because it still takes you 5 days to register a name, and now you also have to trust your secret information to someone else who could easily manipulate that.
But people who don't
Race conditions are even worse.
Sorry,
I view the chance of a race condition as extremely low, and I think the evidence
But when it
bears
does
that out.
happen, like it will happen whenever
all you
names
do is
get
watch
released.
transactions and snipe up people's names as they buy them in one step.
I
I don't
think
think it's feasible.
we have a false dichotomy here, right? We are talking about either it's an auction or it's first come first serve, okay, right? And I don't think that's true. We are talking about our current system of blind auctions where you have 5 days to reveal it. But if we change the auction system, we could have something that has the property of both. I'm not saying that is the action we want, but if you wanted an auction that was you buy a name and then you wait for 24 hours to see if anyone other wants to buy the name, then that system would have the property of if you buy something, you buy it immediately, but there's also an auction, right? It could require only a single auction. I'm not saying that auction is the perfect
Single action.
Single action, yeah, it's not a single transaction, right?
So if you're gonna lock up these domains for whatever, 2 weeks, whatever, to make sure they die before they're renewed, you could basically leave that, you don't need the 5-day auction period, you can literally, that 2 weeks, anyone has the opportunity, if you have a bunch of people that want that name, like, there's an auction stuck.
I'm not
If not,
concerned.
it's the end of that, they can just buy it,
This is
whatever
more
the
like
minimum.
fixing the initial problem, which I'm not convinced that having to wait 5 days is actually a problem.
Yeah, can I also just point out that if we remove the auction mechanism from like buying a domain, it significantly reduces the cost of getting a name, like by a lot, because we're talking about all the 3 steps now are eliminated, so you have way less gas. Like the effort, like the time and the energy and the effort it takes to get to do the auction, like that's a real cost. You
But
know?
we can
So
we can account for that if we want. We can make the effective cost the same just by increasing the cost of registration by the same amount.
It's
that
just
you
saying that
reduce
reduced cost might be a good thing in some way, because this is a different kind of cost. It's like a user experience cost.
I still think that's better solved on a layer on top to let people who wanna provide that service and do it well. And it is feasible to both do it well in the spirit of crypto.
I don't. How do you do that with reveals?
You just commit a reveal on behalf of your clients.
Right,
Yeah.
but then you have. How do you do that in a way that doesn't provide you with an incentive to cheat?
Companies who cheat will not.
Yeah,
Well, then let's get up on crypto. Use banks and move away from the banks.
So basically, what you do is you can like if you want, you can just like audit the company with some crypto, and then you add the cypherpunk fields back in. I mean, imagine that they just do their business on like their kind of blockchain, and they post the Merkle root of it into the thing, and they let you see it and validate all the blocks, and you just like you get to audit their business processes and like see everything happen. I mean, you could potentially see it being relatively low trust.
So I mean, I still think that an auction process in which almost every single option only has one person bidding is a particularly inefficient way to do things. Like imagine going to Christie's and there's just one person in the seat and they just bid on everything.
Sure, but I think there's a few issues. One of them is like the minimum bid amount.
Yeah.
And another is that there's edge cases where more than one person shows up, and there, if you want to have the allocation go to, we have a choice. Like we have the allocation go to whoever knows how to front run transactions, or slash like get the transaction in faster, or whoever bids higher, or do we want to sample them out of a pool? There's a bunch of mechanism choices that we have, but I think that like somehow, what I'm afraid of is that we're going to get front running.
So that's a valid concern, but I think we can devise mechanisms that prevent front running.
Without commit reveal?
With a very simple form of commit reveal. So I go, I'm going to register the name whose hash is this, and once that lock's committed, I go, oh, this is what the name was.
Yeah, so that is similar, but it's still commit reveal.
Yes, but it's also still simpler.
Yeah, sure. So it's fine. You can get rid of front running, but it's still first come first serve.
Yeah.
And so, for example, for like 6-letter domains, or for a name that's just dropped out of this like waiting pile, I don't know what it's called, drop pool.
Drop.
Yeah. So they just come out of the drop pool. Like then, like it's not going to be a matter of front running, because like everyone just kind of knows that the name is becoming available.
What do we lose by giving up? Because it feels like yes, we can treat newly released names differently. We can auction those, but in the long run, everything's under one system, which is whatever system you choose. So I want to understand what we lose by moving to a direct purchase.
With no auction.
With no auction. So, and assuming that we can do it totally securely with no front running, et cetera, et cetera, what do we lose by moving that?
Because there will always be names that are new and people can snipe. I don't think that those who get there first are those who
and I agree with that. I think that the auction, it removes it's the same reason why like people who do high frequency stock trading do it really near New York, right? People who have invested in the infrastructure to snipe in transactions quickly will have a better advantage over everybody else, and I like a system that gives a fairer playing field, and auctions feel like that.
Yeah. I agree with Nick when he says that most of names will eventually be bought by minimum auction, but that doesn't mean that minority of names that are maybe some new meme that happened around, someone says something stupid like on TV, people buy it, right? There will be always like the coffee thing, right? So I don't think that, exactly, I don't think that because Trump tweeted coffee fee, in like 2 minutes, someone should be able to own that name.
I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with it.
I think that's actually a good example of where somehow like newly popular names people will be racing for.
Okay, so subdomains are fine with that.
Yeah.
Like subdomains can be allocated instantly.
Sure.
Like
But basically, having an auction changes the allocation of the name, right? At the end of the day, that's like
don't we like that?
So yeah, I like it, right? And but you're saying what does getting rid of an auction do for us? It like gives us it removes this mechanism for choosing the allocation of the name according to like the highest bidder.
And our idea was right that it's like more user friendly, but I'm getting to the point where I don't think we actually care.
Yeah, I would say it's not the
happens.
ENS's responsibility to show
Pushing things up to the next level.
I think we can, but the reality is we've got auctions around already and people are used to it. We've got UIs out there that have the auction system built into them, and having either multiple different paths down the auction system is like, yeah, you're bidding for a name, congratulations. I thought someone else has bid for it too, so now it's a new system. That's just,
I don't think we should put a lot of weight on existing systems because it's so early in the day. I think we risk ending up in a suboptimal position because we put too much weight on the stuff we'd already done.
I totally agree with that.
No, yeah, I would too, but I would also say that like it's gonna be more, I mean, we're talking about changing one like if it's not a new name and it's not a recent release name, then and only then is it gonna be an instant buy, right?
So I've kind of come around to Alex's suggestion along the lines of you place a bid for a name, and if nobody else places a bid for that name within 24 hours, it's yours. And that simplifies the process, while still for things like Covfefe.eth gives people an opportunity to battle it out for who's the memeiest.
Does that mean you can see what you're bidding on?
It would require a change to the system that probably reveals more information.
But then also, but we're still saying that for brand new names and for recently released names, we're going to do the 5-day auction or no?
Yes and no. You would have a much shorter interval during which people can initially place bids, and if there is more than one, then you go to the regular auction system. But if only one person asks for the name, then you go straight to allocation.
There were a lot of very good reasons why we chose the current auction system.
Yes, but I think that most of them apply to the initial release of names.
Like for new names, like I would really like a couple extra days after revealing. I thought that's a lot of people.
Oh, so we can extend the reveal period as much as we want. But if you want Taylor is great.eth 3 years from now, and you're the only person who happens to want it at that particular time, so you
I assume in 3 years from now he owns all the domains that I buy from him.
let's pretend he doesn't. Then you put in a bid for that name, and within 24 hours nobody else suddenly wants it as well. You just get it. There's no reveal period because it just goes straight to you. But if you want the modern version of Covfefe, then probably 20 other people want that as well, and you go to an auction.
But then it's not a blind auction.
So we would need to sit down and hash out the details as to how much
You absolutely can do a blind auction, just come and reveal it, right? You do a commit, and then reveal showing that you were the only one who
But then you need to commit, and then you need to review.
So I guess what you do is you commit and bid, and you can reveal early. You can reveal early if you're the only bid who showed up. And you have to wait for people to do more reveals. That's fine.
Well, but then we're back to the same system.
Hang on, this is getting into a rat's nest. I think we should sort of like a smaller discussion to see whether we can devise an auction system that's still reasonably masked but provides for an express path for no contention. We had very little time before lunch, but a while ago, Piper, you started listing goals for an improved system, and I only memorized one of them. Can you remember what they were?
The second one is that it, I don't know what to call it. It goes into the dead pool for a period of time.
Right.
So I would like a system that favors people who fuck up a little bit, and so during some period of that time, they can go, oh shit, my shit's not resolving, and they can go get it back.
There's expiry grace periods, and that happens before anything hits the drop pool. So expiry grace period.
But in order for that to work, your name sort of has to stop working. So you wake up, right?
So it's 2 periods the whole time.
Exactly.
And the second period only happens if the first one doesn't catch.
It's like 90 days.
And the drop pool period can be
if nothing happens, you can just send them email. Oh, come on, guys, it's coming up, right?
And then price discovery at the end of that, an auction, a re-auction, so that we don't foster a sniping industry.
Re-auction with express path for non-contention. I actually more and more like if we can not screw up the game theory.
If there's a way to do it without screwing up the game theory
and the privacy, I think you should have a session only about the auction mechanism.
Anything that lets the auction period happen shorter, as long as we can keep all of the same problems.
No, for the drop pool, though, what's going to happen is that you're going to have a third party that just comes and buys these drop names because at least one. What?
The thing is that they can't just snipe them.
Yeah, well,
as long as there's any contention that turns into an auction.
No, but that's what I'm saying is that they're just gonna buy all of that.
Yeah, and they'll probably get expressed with some of them.
But they will actually, but rather than just being able to snipe them out at a fixed price, they will have to actually think about whether or not they want to bid on
I mean, we kind
Not
of
just buy it.
We're talking about the names of people that don't have utility. These are all the names of people in the lease.
Doesn't have utility to the person who released
No,
them.
it doesn't.
They
No, it
didn't have
doesn't.
utility to her.
Yeah.
No,
They
it
had
doesn't even mean
utility
that.
to five other of
I
us.
found
Okay.
90% of the police names have no utility.
We don't know that, but this is the thing is that, like, there's, okay, it's a name that I don't want, okay, it's a name that I'm not willing to pay for, that has value to someone else, I'm just not willing to pay for. It's a private key that I lost, I totally forgot that I own this name. Like, the reason things go in the pool, like, I mean, Marketo was $1 billion company, like, 2 years ago, they literally forgot to re-register Marketo.com and broke everything for like a couple days. Okay, and then someone else bought it for $24, and then they were a nice person, and they gave it to him, and then Marketo donated like $10,000 to the charity of his choice because he was a good person. He could have held that hostage for like millions of dollars.
I'm sure everyone wants lunch, so very quickly, any other goals somebody wants to add to here before we break?
Don't incentivize like.
Can you so when you say price discovery, do you mean the dial that we talked about? Okay, so we need to be a little more clear about that because it's not like it's more like it's more like ensuring competitiveness or kind of like ensuring quality or like or like
how about fair competition?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
It means that rather than the people with the best infrastructure to snipe names up, that when a name becomes available, all of the people who might want it have a reasonably fair chance.
Yeah, I think that's
so.
We should just have fairness
re-auction.
Yeah, but fairness is a good enough principle that I think is like.
But these were specific goals. I don't think. I mean, fairness is a goal.
Re-auction is an implementation of fairness.
Yeah, and the fast path also needs to
let's assume that when I write things up here, they reflect the zeitgeist of what we were discussing. Anything else that needs to go up here?
We haven't really talked about an upfront fee. Is that you also put that in the price discovery?
Pretty much.
So all the fees. So basically, there's fees upfront and recurring.
That's outside of the scope of this.
I mean the recurring fees aren't.
No, that's just about owning a name. This is about what happens as names transition from owned to
No,
not.
I thought this was goals for an improved registrar in general.
It is, but I was.
Oh, but he's talking about a different bullet point than you are.
Okay, then maybe they're all mixed up together.
Okay, so this is just more general.
Last chance.
What you mentioned, that if you had lost the private key, what about some of the hand holding?
I don't think we can account for that.
I think it has to be a second layer solution.
Yeah, that's like just.
It has to
It's true for basically every system.
Or it's third party, like, I mean, that's the thing is that, like, if the ENS could solve what you do when you lose a private key, then, like, but did the ENS pull an ICO and solve the world problems? Like, it won't except for life. Like,
That's not crazy.
Discuss this over lunch.
Or we'll just
or like you probably will do an ICO next week.
We'll just solve the, like, identity lost private key just for the ENS.
Yeah. And if you're watching along at home, we will be resuming in 1 hour at 1 p.m. BST.